It's December 10th, 2011, and it's time for a rival to get some payback. Australia's newest opening pair of Phillip Hughes and David Warner are chasing 241 runs to win against New Zealand in Hobart, aiming to clinch the series 2-0. This is David's first Test series for Australia, but on day 3, the crowd were already getting used to him and his favourite song, Leather on Willow.
Oh, wow.
It's none for 72 at stumps. Now into day 4, it's clear that the Black Caps were tuning up for a concert of their own. One wicket falls after another, and by lunch, Australia were 5 down, Doug Bracewell leading the way. Warner would try all he could to take Australia home, scoring his first ever Test century as he does. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The Black Caps winning just their 3rd ever Test in Australia by 7 runs.
There it is! There's the win for New Zealand!
For most, a drawn series isn't great, but it isn't the end of the world. This team, however, isn't most. For Australia, it was the continuance of a trend, one that had grown voices of its own, getting louder with every passing day. They shouted from the rooftops, some in gleeful celebration, that the mighty Australia is in decline. Its best days are behind it, while some Aussie fans themselves questioned whether they were actually right. With India coming to town in a couple of weeks, the voices were chomping at the bit, waiting to shout even louder. If we want to find out the origins of these voices, the place to look isn't social media, the news or some internet forum. The place to look is the cricket pitch itself. Much has changed since that legendary Australian team whitewashed England at home during the 06-07 Ashes. The Aussies watched as team members slowly retired from the sport. As their opponents seemed to also improve, cracks started to appear.
Oh, it's in the air, that's it, all over, cheerio.
Many would point to the 07-08 Border-Gavaskar trophy, where Australia narrowly won at home as an example, while others would look at the South African tour of Australia a year later. But by the time of the 2010-11 Ashes, it was clear to see. And their performance in the 2011 ICC ODI World Cup made matters worse, being knocked out in the quarter-final stage, Australia's worst result since 1992. What was once the prototype of a winning Test team, Australia had fallen into a place it hadn't seen in decades. Not happy with the slide, however, Cricket Australia went into a phase of deep soul-searching in the aftermath of that Ashes loss. It commissioned a performance review, now known as the Argus Review, and it shone a spotlight on just how far the team had fallen. Australia had only won 5 of its past 11 series, with its ICC Test ranking going from 1st to 5th in the process. Only 1 bowler and no batters were in the top 10 rankings internationally. Indeed, the standard of batting, bowling and fielding had all declined during this period, in particular against leading teams like England, India and South Africa.
What a shout. Oh, a bit of a mix-up. Can he hit him? Yeah. He can. Cadich is gone.
They pointed to a wide variety of root causes, ranging from the obvious like poor performances from leading players, to more systemic issues such as a lack of accountability, poor coordination between Cricket Australia and state cricket, and ineffectual coaching structures, not to mention ongoing issues over the confusing selection of players. Something that was kind of hinted at in this video here, where we looked at Australia's merry-go-round of spin bowlers after Shane Warne. The review recommended widespread changes to restructure the management of Australian cricket behind the scenes. I'll link it below for those who want to dive in further. But for us, 3 of the most important recommendations to be accepted were as follows. 1. The head coach now has a bigger job. They would be directing the overall coaching function of the team and talking with state coaches rather than just being accountable for results on the pitch. 2. The entire selection board would be revamped into a new panel of selectors, including a full-time head selector and others that were part-time. And 3. The head coach and captain were now selectors themselves. This last point was particularly contentious because it had long been the case that the captain did not have a say in team selections. However, the person with a 62.3% win record as Test captain, Ricky Ponting, wouldn't be the man to wield such power. Because after the quarter-final exit of the 2011 World Cup, he stepped down as captain for both the ODI and Test teams, instead opting to stay as a normal member of the side. His successor was a man who had been groomed for captaincy for many years and had been the captain of the Aussie T20 side. He even stood in on occasion for Ricky. It was Michael Clarke. This choice was expected, but that didn't mean that there weren't murmurings of disagreement in the background. The reasons why have many layers. As Ponting stepped down in the midst of a form slump, Clarke didn't have a great Ashes either.
There's an edge and Michael Clarke straight after the drinks break. Next one.
But it wasn't Clarke's form that was the main reason. In fact, much of the disapproval around picking him as captain initially were based on things off the field. Australian captains before Clarke had fitted a certain stereotype. It wasn't really related to their on-field actions either to a certain extent. Border, Taylor, Waugh and Ponting all kept a relatively quiet and reserved private life. But from Michael Clarke's marketability, his celebrity status and public dating life, and all of the attention that came with it, Michael didn't shy away from the spotlight that came with being in the Australian Test team. On the contrary, he embraced it. But add the captaincy into the fold and it goes even further than that. The role is one of the most high profile in Australia, not just because of the pressure, but because of the fishbowl-like focus that it brings upon the captain himself. And Michael wasn't immune from that, including regarding things that happened earlier in his career, such as the 2009 incident with Simon Kadich in the team's dressing room. 99% of the Australian public had never met nor spoken to Michael Clarke in person, but a combination of all of these factors had created a figurative image of him in their minds. And not only was it an image that some didn't like for a captain, their captain, it was immediately compared to the captaincies of Steve Waugh and Ricky Ponting. Perhaps more than most, Clarke faced hurdles in truly winning over the Australian public from the get-go. And to make things harder, unlike Waugh and Ponting, he didn't have an all-time record-breaking side backing him up either. Clarke received the captaincy at the end of the Aussie Test summer, so Clarke's first series as full-time captain was in Sri Lanka. The Australian 11 in the first Test versus Sri Lanka collectively had around 400 caps of Test experience. Here is a chart showing you how these Test caps were divvied up between the players. It shows that while there are a group that regularly had been playing for Australia, there was another who were more or less just starting out. Additionally, there were those who you can't see on this graph because they were yet to make their debut. Two of them, in fact, in this test. Trent Copeland and Nathan Lyon were both handed their debuts in the first test in Gaul. It was a low-scoring affair, played on a pitch in Gaul that would be rated as poor by the ICC. Even on day one, it had significant turn and uneven bounce. The only person to get near a century in the first innings for Australia was Michael Hussey. Sri Lanka's response of 105 all out reinforced how tough things were for the batters. But Nathan Lyon had a dream debut innings himself, getting Kumar Sangakkara off his first ball, ending with 5 for 34 off 15. Australia set Sri Lanka a total of 379 to win, earned off some aggressive stroke making.
We go down the ground, and I've got to say that I think this is probably the best way for him to go.
By the time of the fourth innings on day 3, the pitch had become a proverbial minefield. Not even a 142-run stand between Centurion Mahela Jayawardena and Angelo Matthews was enough, as Ryan Harris took 5 for 62. Nathan Lyon getting the winning wicket to cap off an amazing debut for him, and a successful start to Michael Clarke's full-time reign. The second test in Pallekele would be a draw, but it would star Michael Hussey and debutant Shaun Marsh, both scoring centuries in the match. Mr. Cricket would hit another century in the third drawn test as well, ending with a 1-0 series win to Australia. But it so easily could have been a drawn test series, had it not been for Michael Clarke and Michael Hussey on the 5th day of that third test. The day before, Angelo Matthews scored his first ever test century, with Sri Lanka finishing on 473, Australia trailing by 157 runs. Phil Hughes would get 126 runs himself with some beautiful shots, but his partners were falling cheaply.
Or is that an edge? Has it come off Ponting's glove or bat, and Ponting's walking? Yes, he's out.
After Ponting goes for 28, Michael Clarke comes to the crease to bat out the day. Early on day 5, Phil Hughes is dismissed for 127, leaving Australia 4 for 220. With just under 3 sessions remaining in the game, Australia needed to extend the lead, eating up as much time as possible while batting. Clarke showing how quick footwork can make batting look easy against spin. Soon enough, he is driving this series to safety for Australia. The lead past 150 and then 200. With the lead near 250, he's finally dismissed on 112. Hussey's great form would finish the job. Australia would be all out for 488, a total of 332 runs needed to win. Sri Lanka would only bat 2 overs before the game was called, helped by the player of the series Michael Hussey and sealed by a captain's knock from Michael Clarke, a successful first series win. But such is the case that there wouldn't be too long to bask in the success. Following that series, after being head coach since 2007, Tim Nielsen stood down. He had been told that in order to keep his job moving forward, he would have to reapply. No replacement was called just yet, with the remaining coaching staff covering the duties for their next series, a 2-test affair in South Africa. For many, although this series would be a close contest with greats at the height of their powers, and some showing glimpses of what they would become, it is truly remembered for a number that has remained seared in the brains of Australian fans ever since. Barring Peter Siddle replacing Trent Copeland, Australia's 11 for the first test was identical to their first test in Sri Lanka. It took place at the picturesque Newlands Stadium in Cape Town. Not long ago, this Proteas side beat Australia in Australia, and the core of that side remained. Australia had posted 284 in the first innings. Michael Clarke scored 151 runs of that score, on his own. Some say it's one of his best knocks ever, and it looked even better after Australia fielded, because they had bowled out South Africa for 96. The Aussie lead was 188 runs. Even if Australia get bowled out in the low 100s in the second innings, surely they've got enough runs to bring the game home. But as Australia came back out to bat, still only day 2, they were about to do something that they hadn't done in more than a century. This, the third ball of the innings.
Big appeal, but I thought, no, Gould says out.
Watson gone for 4, and he should have reviewed. Vernon Philander comes on from the other end and poses questions of his own.
Grasped. Regulation catch.
This is Vernon Philander's test debut, but anyone who's watched him bowl knows that more balls like these were coming. Ponting out for a duck, it's 2 for 11. Hughes gone for 9, 3 for 13. Mr. Cricket walks in and goes back. 7 overs hadn't even been bowled yet, but Australia were 4 down. Make that 5, Michael Clarke gone for 2. That lead at the bottom of the screen now looking ever more vulnerable. Shaun Marsh was yet to come out due to back spasms, so they were already in the tail. That made Haddon's wicket all the more precious, but perhaps in a move to take the pressure off, Haddon plays a very rash shot.
Gone! Extraordinary shot from Haddon. Extraordinary cricket from the Australian wicketkeeper.
The third duck of the innings, and at 6 for 18, the lowest ever test score in history of 26 was within reach. Make that 7 for 21. No, 8. No, 9 for 21. Shaun Marsh comes out and is gone for another duck. No one can believe what was going on. Australian fans with a mixture of disbelief, disappointment and anger at what they were seeing. Thankfully for them, Peter Siddle and Nathan Lyon managed to spare them the ignominy of that unwanted record. But with Dale Steyn back on, we all knew what was coming. Lyon, the last wicket to fall, Australia all out for 47. While it might not have been the lowest ever score by Australia, it was only the 4th time in history that Australia was bowled out for under 50 runs, and the first since 1902. On day 2 itself, over 20 wickets fell. The game was back on and the Proteas needed 236 runs to win. And as if the chaos never even happened, Graham Smith and Hashim Amla combined for a 195-run partnership, both eventually scoring centuries. South Africa wins an astonishing game of cricket in 3 days by 8 wickets. And ever since, the number 47 has been associated with Australian cricket and that innings. A day where bat dominated ball, and for Michael Clarke's team, an innings that turned a match. In the second test, Australia would somewhat wash away the events of Cape Town, drawing the series 1-1. The game is remembered as the debut for one Pat Cummins, who took 6 for 79 in South Africa's second innings. The end of that series heralded Australia's time to fly home. At the start of the video, we already saw the result of their next series at home versus New Zealand. And following that, Australia faced an even stronger foe. By now, India were in town, with the 2011-12 Border-Gavaskar trophy on the line. India had held it since 2008, winning 2 series at home back-to-back. For them, it had been a year of the highest highs, though by the time they reached Australia, there were also a few doubts. The huge highlight was the 2011 ICC ODI World Cup win at home, but they also spent time as the #1 test side in the world. By August, that top spot was taken from them after losing 4-0 away to England. A core group of players had successfully carried the team for many years. From Dhoni to Sehwag, Tendulkar, Dravid and Lakshman, not to mention some of the bowlers. But many of them were getting on in age and it was almost time for new faces to be brought in. It's true that injuries had plagued the team through that tour, but issues had been identified as well. Michael Clarke's team had only won one series out of their first three, and those other two series to New Zealand and South Africa were arguably drawn due to their own batting collapses. Back in the fishbowl of an Australian Test summer, the public would still be watching. By this time, a new Aussie coach had been appointed, Mickey Arthur. That new selection panel was in full force too. Their top order had been completely changed once again. David Warner was partnering Ed Cowan on debut, while Shaun Marsh replaced Usman Khawaja, while James Pattinson and Ben Hilfenhaus replaced Pat Cummins and Mitchell Johnson. It seemed that outside of that experienced core, for a time the only constant was change. But that was intended, because Michael Clarke was making this side his own, and if he wanted to show the Australian public that he deserved to wear the captain's armband, this series would be the stage to do it, starting with the first test in Melbourne. It didn't take long for David Warner to get his favourite song playing once again.
Crack, that's his third, that's a ripper.
But a rain break abruptly stopped the show, and when he came back, it was curtains. Shaun Marsh would be gone shortly afterwards. That experienced core had been exposed to 2 for 46, but with the responsibility of captaincy relinquished, Ponting went on the attack with his trademark pull shot.
He pulls away. Take that.
Smashing his way to 50, Ed Cowan soon joins him, and just as it seems Australia are getting away, India pulls them back in. Ponting gone for 62, it's 3 for 159. Clarke gets Australia past 200 before Zahir Khan gets one to bounce up at him, bowled for 31. Hussey was then gone for a duck off an edge, or that's what it seemed.
Yeah, might have got one. Well, I think he's missed it.
It was decided before the series that DRS would not be used due to objections over the technology from India, so this wicket would stand. But these things, they swing in roundabouts. After a watchful 68 off 177 balls, Ed Cowan was out off Ashwin. India was almost back on top. Haddon worked with Peter Siddle to get them closer to 300, before he was gone too. India's pace bowlers were getting rewards for their tight bowling. Some nice shots by the tail get Australia to a score of 333 all out in the first session of day 2. Ben Hilfenhaus would get the early wicket of Gautam Gambhir for 3. There had been much talk about India's ageing batting lineup, but that didn't mean they weren't still great batters.
Great shot. Beautifully played.
Sehwag smashing his way to 50 off 59. Pace and spin getting equal doses of punishment, before Pattinson gets one to come back in. Getting rid of one brought another to the crease. Rahul Dravid now with Sachin Tendulkar, and they put on a 123 run partnership with some picture perfect shots. They both knew this was likely to be their last test at the MCG, both getting to 50, but unfortunately neither would get to a century. Within the space of a couple of overs, both were gone. Lakshman wouldn't be there long either. At 6, one of their newest stars says hello with the shot that would become his trademark.
Beautiful stroke. Just a fraction too full and wide.
But now wasn't his time. From 6 for 238, India were all out for 282, trailing by 51 runs. Ben Hilfenhaus with a 5-for. With Australia batting again in day 3, the pitch had chosen who it wanted to favour, and it wasn't the batters. Warner was gone cheaply, followed by a forgettable leave.
Yes, it is! He's got 2!
It's 2 for 16. Ponting uses all of his height and then some to get on top of this ball, but the wickets keep coming.
Oh, another one!
With Clarke gone, flashbacks of 47 start to appear. These two, though, wouldn't let that happen. Ponting and Hussey get the lead to triple figures and keep going, both getting 50s. But India wouldn't be overrun. Brad Haddon in the tail wouldn't add too much to the score sheets, as Mr. Cricket hung around, falling before getting a deserved century. Pattinson and Hilfenhaus add vital runs before Australia were all out for 240, setting a target of 292. India's bowlers had kept them in with a chance, albeit a small one. Any Indian win here would likely start with a Sehwag onslaught, but...
Oh, and he's got him! Well, that's a huge wicket!
After Hilfenhaus broke through, the Victorian pair of Peter Siddle and James Pattinson took the shiny red ball and wrought havoc. Wickets tumbled in succession, turning into a collapse. Hilfenhaus getting his second wicket off Virat Kohli. It was 5 for 69. Sachin fought hard, but he was gone off Siddle. India's remaining lineup, headed by MS Dhoni, started to swing, even getting some luck along the way. The Aussies would continue to take wickets though. The tail fought to the end, but with this great catch, the result was secured.
He's underneath it. Ball well taken, David Warner. That's the test match for Australia.
Victory by 122 runs, Australia lead the series 1-0. It was a great start for Australia, but a start was all that it was. As we move to Sydney, we reach a place that is special to Australian cricket, the site of numerous defining moments in its history. It was where Sydney Gregory hit the first ever Test double century seen in Australia, where Don Bradman and Sydney Barnes scored 234 runs each in the same innings to hit 405 runs in a partnership, the largest fifth wicket partnership in Test history, and where Steve Waugh scored a century off the last ball of the day to equal Don Bradman's 29 Test centuries. These are just a few of many, many more. In this Border-Gavaskar trophy, Michael Clarke wanted to make a statement, and what better place than here, his home ground. But in the footsteps of these greats, if only we knew what he really had in store. Under bright and sunny skies, the SCG held its 100th Test match. No changes were made to either side as India batted first. India had the chance to take the initiative in good batting conditions early on. James Pattinson had other ideas.
Oh, he's gone!
Sehwag fiercely drives 1 for 4, but Dravid would be gone soon after. His bravery would continue until he blinked and paid the price. Lakshman was gone for single digits soon after. In little more than 20 overs, India were 4 for 59. Sachin Tendulkar found himself in a familiar situation from years past. He himself had scored 3 Test centuries at the SCG. One of them turned into a 241 not out, where he didn't hit a single cover drive. Virat Kohli remained for a time before Peter Siddle's bowling caught the edge. Sachin wouldn't add a 4th total to that list, chopping on for 41. Dhoni and Ashwin put on 54 runs together before Ashwin and Zaheer Khan were gone.
Goes short, and there's another one.
In under a day, India were bowled out for 191. Umesh Yadav becoming Peter Siddle's 100th Test wicket. MS Dhoni left unbeaten on 57. Australia were about to find out if it was a case of India misreading the conditions or otherwise.
Out! Yes, caught the second time. Big wicket.
Early wickets to David Warner and Shaun Marsh gave them a glimpse. Then Ed Cowan was gone, trapped in front. The next batter to meet Ricky Ponting in the middle was the captain. Michael Clarke himself would write about the lead up to that day in his book. This one. It says that he had been nervous ever since he woke up that morning, more so than usual. His partner had encouraged him to keep to his routines and focus on what he had to do himself, something that he had gotten away from ever since being captain. It wasn't just the pre-game nerves that was unsettling him either. His team might have won in Melbourne, but he didn't contribute that much with the bat, and he was yet to put that stamp down as captain in front of the Australian public. To make him more nervous, on the ride into the stadium that morning, he is shown an email by coach Mickey Arthur, one that he isn't meant to see. It was from John Inverarity, the new head selector, and it was about him. John was concerned about Michael's batting. He thought that Michael might not be the player he used to be, and that he had deficiencies in his batting technique. Clarke would keep that information to himself, using it for fuel for when he came out to bat, like right now. Australia's 3 for 37 in the final session of day 1. After surviving some fiery short pitch bowling from Ishant Sharma, he gets into the 20s with Ponting building his own score. Captains past and present combined to build towards separate 50s of their own. Australia pass 100 in the process, with both ending at stumps in the 40s.
It's hit with force.
Into day 2, Clarke quickly gets to 50 and things are starting to come together. Ponting follows with a glorious drive for 50 himself. The pitch overnight had settled and there were plenty of runs in it now. Time to attack. The runs start to flow from both ends. The 150 run partnership comes up and then the 200 for Australia. Clarke brings up his 18th Test century in the first session of day 2. Ponting gets his 40th after lunch.
Leg stump finds a gap. Can he hit the stumps? Oh, I reckon he was out, but that'll do.
These two push the total past 300 and Clarke gets to 150. But trying to hit one on the up, punter has finally gone for 134. An awesome innings to help put Australia in front. Michael wasn't done, and Michael Hussey, one of the form players of this video, was now at the crease. Action resumes, only this time Hussey is joining in. After tea, Clarke reaches his double century, and has now scored more than the entire Indian first innings with no signs of stopping. They close out the day with some big hits, and Hussey reaches his 50. Just how far will Clarke go? With this shot here, he equals Doug Walters for the highest test score by an Aussie at the SCG, and gets his 250 before stumps. He surpasses Wally Hammond's 251 the next day. His innings is now the third highest individual test score ever at this ground. Hussey scores a vital century to partner him. With this 4, Clarke surpasses not only Brian Lara's score of 277, but R.E. Foster's 287. This innings was now the highest ever individual test score at the SCG. The big 300, almost a foregone conclusion.
What a wonderful shot to bring it up on as well.
Australia passes 600, and Test cricket's highest ever individual score of 400 not out by Brian Lara is visible in the distance. But here, Michael Clarke, the player on 300 plus, is soon accompanied by Michael Clarke, the captain. At 4 for 607, Australia have a lead of 416 runs with roughly half the game still to go. If they want to take a 2-0 series lead with India's lineup on this pitch, the runs are already there for Australia. Time is now the more valuable commodity to stop this match from becoming a draw. He keeps batting along for Hussey to get to 150, but at 4 for 659 and a lead of 468, he declares. Michael Clarke still 71 runs from Brian Lara's milestone, leaving the field on 329 not out. That's mind-blowing to me, but in a good way. Before that point, in the 130 odd years of Test cricket, not to mention thousands upon thousands of Test innings, a triple century or more had only been scored 25 times. When you're in that kind of form, you ride it all the way to the end. It shows the kind of person that Michael Clarke was as a captain, to put his team's success in that match ahead of a shot at surpassing Brian Lara. I'm not sure many would have done the same. But on a pitch that was flat enough for them to declare on 659, it was now India's turn. Hilfenhaus made sure Sehwag wouldn't get away quickly.
Wow, that's beautifully caught.
Gautam Gambhir would push back against his slow start in the series, looking comfortable off pace and spin alike, moving past his 50, though Rahul Dravid would be another to fall to Benny Hilfenhaus, after spending over 1.5 hours at the crease. On 83, Gambhir would fall short of his own century. The pedigree of Sachin Tendulkar and VVS Lakshman joined at the crease, each hitting 50s. India were 3 for 253, still trailing by over 200 runs. It would take Captain Clarke to find the breakthrough.
Don't see any reason why not. That's out. That's out. Yes, he is. Tendulkar's gone.
Tendulkar gone for 80, while the Hilfenhaus peach gets Lakshman soon after. Kohli and Dhoni would both be out for single digits, but the tail would well and truly wag. Ravi Ashwin and Zaheer Khan hitting 62 and 35 respectively. Even with a pretty good response, this mountain of Aussie runs would end up being too much to overcome. India all out for 400, Australia wins by an innings and 68 runs.
Is out. 5 for Hilfenhaus.
The third test was an opportunity for Australia to regain the Border-Gavaskar trophy with a game still in hand. And for someone in particular, another shot to play all their hits. Australia's exploits in the first 2 tests brought the Aussie fans to the Wacker in droves. The third test in Perth was sold out for the first 2 days. The team went with a 4-prong pace attack. India followed suit, bringing in Vinay Kumar on debut for Ravichandran Ashwin. Australia sent India into bat on a deck with a greenish tinge. The first ball a sign of things to come. A textbook outswinger would have Sehwag's name on it, and another was soon to fall.
And ball's in.
At a time when India needed their batting order to find some sort of form, Australia's hounding line and length was pulling them apart at the seams. Virat Kohli and VVS Lakshman fought for the only partnership of note. Siddle would keep getting them to come forward, though staying back wasn't much better.
Against India is another edge. Is taken comfortably at first.
At 6 for 152, Mitchell Starc gets his first. He would give batters nightmares with that ball for years to come. The tail didn't give much opposition either. This was a team effort with the ball. Hilfenhaus topping the wicket sheet with 4 for 43 off 18. India all out for 161. When Australia came out to bat, the swing was still there, but it didn't seem to matter to David Warner.
Punches down the ground.
He treated this innings almost like a T20. Over after over, fours were smashed all around the ground. He reaches 50 in only the 11th over, and the hits keep coming.
There it is.
Leather on Willow gets played louder and louder around the ground, with Ed Cowan singing backup. With the crowds going nuts, there was only one proper way to reach triple figures.
Oh, he's gone long this time. Yes!
This day one Perth crowd gets their money's worth, as stumps is called with Australia none for 149. Why not continue the show into the next day? Ed Cowan brings up his second half century of the series, an innings just as important as David's. There were no Indian answers for David Warner, Australia surging past their first innings total. After 38 overs of bearing an opening onslaught, India finally gets a wicket. Despite what those two showed, this pitch still wasn't that easy to bat on, and the wicket started to fall. Warner would be the second Aussie batter in this series to surpass India's entire first innings score on his own. But at 180, it was time to leave the stage.
Wait a minute. Nicely judged. Yes, it is.
Australia leading by well over 100 runs. David Warner throws his guitar pick into the crowd, a candidate for permanent test opener. There would be no encore to that performance in this innings, not even by Michael Clarke and Hussey. India's bowlers would manage to take the 6 remaining wickets for less than 80 runs. Australia all out for 369. India's first task was to get 208 runs and back into the lead. It was an aggressive yet streaky start, though in a place that Lilly and Thompson love to play, Stark bowls one they'd be proud of.
Good pace, Cement! Caught in the gully!
India would indeed pass their first innings score of 161, but just by 10 runs. The only innings of note was a Rahul Dravid hard-fought 47 of 114 and a Virat Kohli 75. 7 of India's lineup would be dismissed for single figures, 4 of them ducks. India all out for 171, losing by an innings and 37 runs.
2! Australia have wasted no time.
That meant one thing. After years of watching cherished trophies, records and their spot at the top of the test world slip from their grasp, Michael Clarke's Australia had regained the Border-Gavaskar trophy and were starting to climb back up. By now, the 4th test in Adelaide was a dead rubber. But it's not one that should be forgotten after Perth. It has milestones and historic moments that one shouldn't miss. If Clarke hadn't made a big enough statement already in this series, he would have another massive innings here. It could be the headline of most players' careers, if not for the unbeaten triple century that he scored in Sydney. At the crease with him was Ricky Ponting, who brought up his 13,000th test run in this innings, on his way to his 41st test century.
41 test hundreds for Ricky Ponting, 23rd in Australia, that's a record.
After scoring a double century, Clarke would be dismissed. Him and Ponting putting on a 386 run partnership together. At that point, it was the 5th highest 4th wicket partnership in test history, only 2 runs short of Bill Ponsford and Donald Bradman. In the company of greatness, that's the height that these two reached in this series. Ponting would get all the way to 221. Australia declare on 7 for 604. The milestones of this 4th test weren't just Australia's, though India's were somewhat more bittersweet. This would be the last test for Rahul Dravid and VVS Lakshman, 2 of the greatest batters of the modern era and arguably all time. Additionally, for Australian cricket lovers, it would be the last time they saw any of the top 5 playing test cricket down under, nor Zaheer Khan. But new shoots of rejuvenation were already sprouting. Virat Kohli would score his first ever test century here. This series would be a major indicator to Indian selectors that it was time to move on to the next generation. And maybe it served as fuel for Virat Kohli and for what he did to Australia in later years. India were bowled out for 272, left trailing by over 300 runs. Australia declared their second innings at 5 for 167. A clean 500 runs were set to win, but India would only get to 201, losing the fourth and final test match by 298 runs. From first to last, with new players and old, Australia dominated and whitewashed the series 4-0. Cricket history is not a straight line. Teams rise and teams fall. Some we are yet to see rise again. But while the past lives with all of us like our shadow, the future is something that none of us can truly see, despite what the naysayers would tell you. It makes the individual moments of the here and now all the more important to seize upon. It's the here and now where new memories and records are made. Australia might not dominate the world like it once did ever again, but as Michael Clarke's Australia showed, it doesn't mean that one's best days are behind them, or that fans like Australia's can't have the optimism to think that they could. Hey guys, cheers for checking out the video and making it this far. If you liked it, you know the drill by now. Please leave a thumbs up down below and maybe think about sharing it with someone who you think might like it also. Some of the newer players featured in this video would go on to have a year of cricket to remember in 2023. A year we covered in a 3-part series that's on a playlist here. It's a long one, so maybe you can watch them over the course of a test match during the lunch break. And until the next one, take care, and I'll see you soon.